The year was 1985. Back to the Future, Rambo First Blood Part 2, and Rocky IV were dominating the box office. Live Aid was saving lives in Ethiopia with famine relief bucks. A gallon of milk cost $2.20, and the airwaves were plagued with an overpopulation of sick riffs. And that's what you, me, and Turkey are here to talk about today. Well, hey there kids, it's your good buddy, Uncle Ben. Did you guys know that 1985 holds the historical distinction of being the only year deemed important enough to have a song written about it by Bowling for Soup? Now you do. In '85, I was just a little one-year-old Uncle Ben, still pooping my pants in my playpen, but I was doing so to the soundtrack of some amazing riffs in all different styles of music that were on the radio at that time. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 20 riffs from 1985 that I used to shit my pants to. I don't know if they made me shit my pants, but I was definitely shitting my pants while I was hearing these things. So it might be like a causation correlation problem here, but you get the idea. But you know guys, riffs don't grow on trees, they grow on my Patreon account over at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. A couple weeks ago, I assembled a mega list of 1985 riffs, and my Patreon community voted on the ones that they thought were the absolute best. This video isn't just my personal top 20, it's a reflection of the opinions of fine young sophisticates like yourself over in that Patreon community. So be sure to join the fun by clicking the Patreon link in the video description below, sign up for even just a $1 a month level, and you'll get access to all kinds of bonus lessons, backing tracks, polls, and other cool stuff. To recreate these righteous riffs, I use a variety of my Suhr guitars and basses, all running into the Fractal Audio Axe FX 3. By 1985, the big four of thrash metal, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax, had already established themselves as the kings of brutality, but there's a couple other bands that slipped through the cracks that offered some incredible riffs, like entry number 20 right here from Exodus. The importance of the music from this era can't be understated, and I like to think that it echoed through the hallways of music history to influence the next generation of musicians. Maybe even going all the way to, Seattle in the 90s, where maybe a blonde-haired guitar player tuned his guitar down a whole step and pretty much played this exact same riff. I don't know. When it comes to guitar effects pedals in the 1980s, there's no bigger name on the map than Boss, which makes sense considering that they're actually a division of the Roland Corporation, whose synthesizers and guitar amps like the JC120 also had such a huge part of the sound of 80s music. These things are extremely common. You could probably go into any guitar store, throw a rock, and hit one, and then get thrown out of the store for throwing rocks. Coming in at number 18 is one of my absolute favorite riffs from the man that many have described as Japan's answer to Eddie Van Halen, Akira Takasaki of Loudness. Coming in at number 17, we've got a soaring guitar melody from the best beard in the business, one of my favorite players ever, Billy Gibbons. And while this era of the band might not be as raw and bluesy as their early stuff, they still got some really awesome hooks and killer guitar tone. Coming in at number 16, we have a riff so mighty that it took the power of two Phils to make it happen. Phil Collins and Philip Bailey. This is definitely one of those songs that I remember hearing from the backseat of my mom's Ford Escort station wagon when I was just a young uncle. But I have forgotten how absolutely ripping the guitar solo in this song is. One of my favorite things about the intro of this song is the two different time fields that are going on. The drums and guitars are very clearly in 4/4, but on top of that there's this little cycling melody that's actually in 3/4 that just kind of loops over it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that. Most of you guys know number 15 here because it appeared prominently on the soundtrack of one of the most iconic movies of the 80s. You'll know it as soon as you hear the first chord, but you gotta be the one to provide all the haze. "1985 had no shortage of badass metal riffs, including this one by the band with the most screamable name in metal. I like how pretty much every Slayer riff feels like it's a race to include all the most diabolical intervals as quickly as possible. Right out of the gate under that E-flat pedal tone, the first move that we get features that flat 9 interval, or the Phrygian interval as a lot of people think about it, as well as the next one that features the flat 5th, the tritone, the devil's interval. All the most evil musical ideas in one convenient riff. And speaking of tritones, boy howdy does the next riff ever have them in spades, courtesy of the Swedish shred master Yin Yang Milkshake. Yingatine Malmatine. YOLO Mouse Meat. In the Patreon poll, this riff just barely beat out another one by Yngwie, I Am a Viking, which is one of my absolute favorite riffs ever. But this one's still pretty awesome. This riff features something that Yngwie likes even more than Ferraris and donuts. It's the ascending tritone that spells out sort of a diminished 7 chord. A couple years ago, my good buddy and big-time record producer Mark Lewis told me that every time he hears that riff, he hears it as tritone, 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 tritone. And now so do you. Number 12 on our list here comes from one of the most important tunesmiths of the 80s. This song was accompanied by an extremely iconic and popular music video, and like a lot of the other pop hits that made it onto the list, starts off with a really recognizable drum groove. So the drum beat starts this tune off, and it's a very straightforward, easy to hear pattern. But then the way that the guitar and the bass come in is really interesting. The guitar actually comes in early, and the bass hook comes in late. Neither one of them really starts on beat number 1 at all. So there's kind of this like weird gap around beat number 1 where the guitars have already started and the bass hasn't started yet. 1, 2, 3, guitars come in early. 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. Coming in on that up of 4. Meanwhile, the bass hook also avoids beat number 1 and comes in on its upbeat. Again, bass is going to be on the up of 1. The guitars have already started. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. What can I say about our number 11 pick here that I didn't literally just say about number 12? Extremely iconic music video, hooky drum beat at the front. If it works, it works. Kicking off the top 10 here with an iconic intro riff by one of the greatest guitar players of all time, Gary Moore. I feel like this riff is like the perfect soundtrack to an 80s training montage. See what you think about it. Number 9 on our list is a smash hit from one of the biggest pop acts of the 80s. And by the way, I love that you guys didn't just vote for like all the metal riffs. You know, you guys voted for as much pop stuff as I would have. So I love seeing songs like this show up on the list. This is yet another pop tune on our list that starts off with a really hooky drum part. I think you'll know what it is as soon as you hear it. Number 8 on our list comes courtesy of one of the big four, Megadeth. The band's debut album, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, is chock-a-block with sick riffs, but the title track here just barely beat out the mechanics to make it onto the list. Coming in at number 7, we've got a mega smash hit from one of my favorite bands of the era. Coming in hot at number 6, we got another thrash classic from one of the big four, Madhouse by Anthrax, which on the Patreon poll narrowly beat out my choice, which was Medusa, one of my favorite riffs ever. Okay, so now we're coming in on the top 5 of this list. Very exciting moment. But before we get to that, I gotta toss in some of my own choices that I put on the poll that didn't really get enough votes to make it onto here, but I think deserve a place on this list because they have a place in my heart. First one that I want to give an honorable mention to comes from the monsters of sad boy rock themselves, The Cure, one of my absolute favorite bands of all time. If you want to learn how to layer stuff, study The Cure. Next up on my honorable mentions, we got a freaky, styly, funky little bass riff from a little band from the West Coast that you may have heard of. For me, it's all about the bass riff, but the guitar parts going on back here are super funky and cool too. Up next on my list, we got a riff from a dude who was very important and influential on me as a young Uncle Ben, introducing me to so much comedy and other styles of music that I never would have heard otherwise. He also wrote some killer originals, like this one. Up next, we're going to check out the opening riff from the signature song of your favorite metal band's favorite metal band. And the last one on my list of honorable mentions comes from one of the greatest guitar players of all time, the space-age jazz fusion pioneer, Allan Holdsworth. Now, of course, Allan was primarily known as a soloist, but every now and then he'd bust out a sick riff on you, like this title track from the record, Metal Fatigue. Now, you might have noticed there that the guitar tone and the harmony and stuff there was really strange. It's because Allan played this riff with a harmonizer set to one whole step down from the notes that he's actually playing. So if he's playing an A note, it's also harmonizing with a G note. Part of what makes this riff sound so otherworldly and strange. So now we're on to the top 5 that my Patreon community selected, and I can't lie to you, these were all like runaway winners. Nothing even came close to these. I'm so glad that you guys chose this next one right here because I grew up listening to this dude's music, and it's a part of the soundtrack of the biggest movie of 1985. It had to be on the list. Huey Lewis rules. Coming in at number 4, we've got another non-metal choice that I'm so proud of you guys for voting on, because this comes from one of the most underrated bands of all time. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're huge, but I still meet tons of people who have never heard of this group, and they definitely should, because they have like 80 million great songs. Coming in at number 3, we got some classic riffage from Mr. Scary himself, George Lynch of Dokken. Whenever I was making the track for this one, it was honestly kind of hard to stop with it because it's just one cool riff after another, starting with that cool clean guitar figure at the intro. Alright, so our top 2 entries here were neck and neck in the polls the entire way through, and this one was just barely behind our number 1 entry. And my God, is it ever an awesome riff. So good, in fact, that I showed you guys a deep dive breakdown on how to play it back on Weekend Wank Shop 192. And just a week or so ago on my channel, I showed you guys how to play the awesome rippin' Warren DeMartini guitar solo from this iconic tune. Let's stretch out those mitts and get ready to lay it down. Okay, so here we are, the #1 riff of 1985, and I've got to tell you guys, you made the absolute right choice. This one pulled ahead there at the end and took it home, and I'm so glad that it did, because when I think of 1985 and all the tunes and stuff that were released that year, I can't think of anything more singularly important and iconic, I've used that word like 100 times in this video, than this riff right here. But the unfortunate truth is that now that we're here at the very top of the list, we've reached the one riff that honestly I can't play right, because I've never heard anybody else play it right. This is one of those ones that just has some kind of magic going on with it that I've never heard anybody replicate, but I'll do my best. I've got to call that close enough. I know that somebody in the comments section is already furiously typing that I played it wrong. I know that I did. I've never heard anybody play that riff right. And I was talking to my good buddy and amp tech extraordinaire, John Cooper, about this riff the other day. And the conclusion that he came to makes so much sense. The reason this is the most important riff of 1985 is because if you want to hear it, you've got to go straight to the source. You can't just pick up your guitar and make this riff happen. If you want to hear it, you got to push play on the original recording and hear Mark Knopfler bust it out. He's one of those few guitar players that nobody even tries to replicate. Him and Jeff Beck are the two guys that I can't say I can think of any clear-cut clone that's just trying to rip off these guys playing and imitate them and stuff. There's a million Yngwie clones, there's a million Eddie clones, but nobody even tries to touch Jeff Beck or Mark Knopfler. And there's got to be something to it that these are both players that use their fingers to play instead of a pick. There's got to be something about that that makes it impossible to replicate their sound, because you're not literally using their fingers to play. Other than Mark's finger magic, there's some other cool stuff going on with the tone here, using this Gibson Les Paul, of course. And I'm going through a wah pedal that's been cocked about 70% of the way down to give it that kind of dry, sort of nasally tone. Legendary playing, legendary music video, legendary song. I can't think of any better way to cap this list off. But I'm sure that some of you guys out there are like, but no, Uncle Ben, you didn't include my favorite riff from 1985, so if I skipped yours, be sure to let me know what it is in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, liking and subscribing to my channel. Be sure to ring the bell for notifications every time I upload a new slice of fried gold. This video took a absolute ass ton of time to make, and we'll be making $0 due to all the copyrighted music and stuff in it. So if you enjoyed this video and want to say thanks, as well as gain access to a ton of cool bonus stuff like backing tracks, bonus guitar lessons, and so much more, be sure to consider supporting that Patreon page over at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. Click the link down there in the video description to check out the page and sign up today, even for just $1 a month to get access to all kinds of cool stuff. A huge thanks goes out to my lovely Patreon community for making this video possible by voting on all those riffs that I put up. You guys made great choices. I'm proud of you. You like things that are nice. Thanks again for watching, guys. Now get away from the computer and go play some guitar. Less clicking, more picking.